crap, it actually worked.
Shortly after the development of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the same team began developing a new traditional top-down Zelda game, which, believe it or not, originally started as a Mario Maker-esque Zelda builder, but it eventually grew into its own game. The main mechanic was to focus on creating copies or echoes of objects around you to help you navigate this new Hyrule, and the team decided to let Zelda take the helm on this one, which honestly works really well here. The game was released on the Nintendo Switch on September 26, 2024.
I, like many others, was cautiously optimistic about this one.
The game seemed like fun, but deep down it looked like it could have some flaws. The echo mechanic gives the player a lot of freedom, and when a game like this has too much freedom, the level design can feel overlooked and lacking, and the combat looked weird to say the least. I mean, a Zelda game without a sword? Interesting.
But I picked it up regardless and recently completed it. So, is it worth the purchase?
The game is a really strong opening with Link running through a dungeon with all his big weapons, more hearts than I've ever seen in a Zelda game because I'm bad at them, and the same determination I have when I decide to skip class. But quickly Link gets sucked away into a rift, barely freeing Zelda, giving her a chance to save the day. I don't want to say too much on the story in fear of ruining it for you, so I'll keep this segment brief. It's your same classic Zelda story. A big bad is trying to ruin Hyrule and it's up to you to stop it. But how exactly are you going to do that? Well, with this game's brand new mechanics, of course. The main mechanic of this game is brought to you from Tri, this little fella you meet early on. What it can do is give you the ability to create echoes of pretty much anything, from pots to enemies. Once copied, you can make as many echoes as you want as long as it's under the number of tries that you have. But this mechanic is so much better than I thought it would be. It's used for combat and to traverse the locations. You'll have to place beds to climb, floating platforms to move, boxes, stools, enemies, and more. You can also place healing items like soft beds to refill hearts. Genuinely, the amount of freedom packed into this ability is insane. But Tri also comes with a second ability, Bind. You can use it in combat, which is fun, and at first, I didn't really see the potential with this one. But once I messed around with it more, it started to all make sense. Mixing it with echo abilities is so much fun and expands the game's freedom exponentially. Now, as for the moments you're required to use Bind, it's mostly used just to open doors. But through these two mechanics, the game leaves you with a feeling of genius. A wise feeling, if you will, which goes hand in hand with this being Zelda's game. Since she is the Triforce of Wisdom, this was the perfect way to tie in the ability, and I definitely think it's the highlight of the game. Once past the opening, Zelda is thrown out into the world with a lot of freedom. A mark will be created on the map of your next location, but you can pretty much go anywhere you want right from the start. The game doesn't have a lot of restrictions, which can be pretty fun. But thank goodness the game points you in the right direction. I'm bad at Zelda games, so I kinda need that. On that note, the stage design and dungeons I was pretty worried about. When you have as many tools as this game gives you to traverse, it makes it really hard to make good level design around it. Thankfully, Echoes of Wisdom stage layouts left me shocked as to how smart some of these puzzles were. The level design is insane, and it has the player using their abilities to their fullest extent. I mean, some of these puzzles are genius. Combining Zelda's moveset with the echo mechanic is so cool and really smart. This is the most freedom you'll have in a top-down Zelda game, and just like Breath of the Wild, it feels like you can go about anywhere with your tools. The game does also have a checkpoint and fast travel option because it would kinda suck to run back and forth from location to location. Now, going into this game, I was most worried about not having a sword. The traditional combat in Zelda games is you swinging your sword with the B button. Without that, what do you do to take out enemies? Well, as the title of the game says, you gotta use your wisdom. Normal enemies now feel like a game of chess. What tool have you seen before that you can use to take down even the easiest of creatures? You can go in throwing things or stand on the sidelines as an army of little buddies takes on your foes. Genuinely, it's a lot more solid than I expected it to be, and it works really strong for a Zelda game. With a large amount of echoes, provided you learn them as you go, Zelda has a huge toolset for all different types of situations. Each enemy will require a different takedown, and it's up to you to figure out what that is. And while this is a really solid mechanic and much more fun than I thought it would be, you can't get all the fights done this way. That's why you have the hero's sword. Zelda picks up a sword in her quest, which gives you the classic Legend of Zelda items like the sword, the shield, the bow, and bombs. This can be used to take out enemies more swiftly or deal more damage to bosses. But be careful, the sword only lasts for so long. You can refill your meter by jumping into voids and collecting these little blue things. I think this adds a lot to the game because sure, this is a really good option for fighting. It's probably better than your echoes, but you have to be smart about when, where, and how long you use it. But be careful, bosses tend to lurk around every turn, and when a bigger baddie comes around, is your combat enough? Thankfully, bosses drop hero shards most of the time, giving you the perfect chance to blend everything you've learned. A typical boss setup has you finding the perfect echo to access their weak point. Once completed, you have your moment to strike. You do so by combining both your echoes and your hero ability. While there's a couple annoying ones out there, for the most part, these are all really solid boss fights. While the mechanics are strong and the level design is solid, there are a couple points where this game could use some work. First and foremost, with the number of echoes you pick up on your journey, your menu gets pretty cluttered. And the main way to access said echoes is through this little scroll wheel. And when you have over 100 of these, it gets pretty annoying scrolling through the entire thing just to find a rock. The game also follows Breath of the Wild's eating mechanics. By that I mean other than beds, if you want to heal, you have to save up a bunch of food and eat as much as your little heart desires until you fill up your hearts. This is fine, and it may just be me, but I really don't like this method of healing, and I think it feels especially out of place here. And finally, the game experiences a lot of frame rate drops. It would be tolerable if it was like anytime you enter a new area, but the problem is certain parts of the game has Zelda running from one side of Hyrule to the other. And while you're doing so, the game is constantly loading in new areas and locations, causing the frame rate to plummet. To wrap this up, I went in not really knowing what to expect. I love the reuse of the Link's Awakening art style, but I was weary of the combat and puzzles. But thankfully, the game proved me wrong. Echoes of Wisdom nails almost everything it sets out to do, with its stellar level design and intuitive mechanics. And while the menus and frame rate could use some work, all in all, this is a really fun game in the Zelda series, and if you're a fan of classic Legend of Zelda games, I would highly recommend you give this one a shot.
Wow. Never thought I'd see the day. If this thing can make perfect copies of that, think of all the other things this thing can do. I could stop world hunger. I could make myself rich. Wait, can it... Well, let's try something first. Can it copy myself?